education as much as we do. Couple of other things that I'm going to tell you about today. I brought a couple of cases that happened recently at the Real Estate Commission. I do sit on the Real Estate Commission as a commissioner, have been for about a year and a half. It's not as scary as it may appear, but if you have never attended a real estate commission, you should attend. If you've never attended the meetings, they happen once a month, and watch the meetings and find out when there's going to be a hearing. And those are the most interesting times to attend. But if you haven't been up there, you want to get up there. And you never want your files to go up there. And we'll talk more about that and what happens at the real estate commission level for you as well. So disclosures are, if you are going to get sued in real estate, you are going to get sued because you screwed up with the disclosures, okay? This is probably the most important thing for you to know if you want to keep your money in your pocket. What's the deductible for our E&O insurance? Who knows? Nobody knows the deductible for the insurance. $5,000 deductible. Whatever split you are on is the split that happens with the market center. So it can be expensive for you. And most times, even if you're right, but there's a question, the insurance company is going to want to settle that. And because it's cheaper than going to litigation. So prevention is the cure. Make it absolutely clear. And as we go through the disclosure, I'm going to tell you some stories about how I've been bitten from it as well. So this disclosure, I'm going to pick on somebody. This disclosure is on a property up in Raymond that I know well because I put it under contract personally, did the inspections, and walked away from the deal, and gave the inspection reports, all of them, to the listing agent. Now, first thing we want to talk about, if you're the listing agent, do you want that inspection report?
No.
Probably not. Whose decision is it?
Sellers.
It's your seller's decision. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, the agent is sending me the inspection report. Do you want it, or do you want me to tell them we don't want it and we're not looking at it? Recent case at the Real Estate Commission where an agent who generally represents banks, and the banks had told him, we do not want any inspection reports. You are not to accept them or look at them. And so when an agent sent him an inspection report and he refused it and told them, I'm not opening it, I can't have it, my seller says that I am not to look at it, the other agent took him to the Real Estate Commission. And the Real Estate Commission said no. He was following what his seller told him to do. Now, if you gain knowledge and they say the septic system failed, I'm sending you a report, do you then have the knowledge that you have to disclose?
Yeah.
And if you go to your seller and your seller says, I don't want that disclosed, what do you do?
Yeah.
Say, I'm sorry, I have to disclose that. My career as a real estate agent cannot be lost by backing you up on this. If you don't want to disclose this issue, then I can't work for you. Period, amen, because it's not worth it. What do you have to disclose? What do you have to disclose? Material defects. Material defects that you know or should have known. Does that mean that when you go to the class, excuse me, I was distracted because I saw my picture walk by and it freaked me out. Did not know that was doing that. My train of thought. Totally lost my train of thought. Okay, we're going on. Let's go with this. Okay. This is property location, 10 McDermott Road, Raymond, Maine. Do you have to type these up?
No, I'm going to write them.
No, you can write it. You can. They're nice and neat this way. It's great. First thing, type of system. Well, how do you know? How do you know whether you got a dug well or a driven point or a drilled well? If they have records, how else?
The town without knowledge of that?
Maybe not, might, and the septic design sometimes will tell, but can you go just by that? How else can you tell? Kind of well you got. Yes, you can look at the property. What's a drilled well look like? Yeah, little, maybe, I don't know, what's that, maybe 4-inch, 6-inch diameter, comes up out of the ground with a cap on it. What's a dug well look like? Big round thing. If you have wells that are not being used on the property, do you have to disclose that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So here we have a drilled private well. Have you experienced any malfunctions with the water system? No. Quality, yes. Quantity, no. Have you had the water tested? Yes. Date of most recent test, June 1st, 2016. Now, this property was listed a long time before that, but why do they have such a recent water test?
They knew they were gonna sell.
No, it was listed a long time ago.
Previous
Then was-
buyer that came in and did
I was the buyer that came in, did the inspection and walked, and gave them a copy of the water test. So they have it, right? What's it say next to that?
Our test results available.
What do they say?
No.
Of course they are, they have them in their pocket. I gave them to them. Now, you're a listing agent, you have a water test right here. The seller says, no, I don't want you to give it out, what do? You got it, you got it, you got it. So there. Any knowledge test unacceptable. Results, pretty standard stuff. Then we go down to recent tests showed high radon in the water and high uranium. What do you think is going to happen when somebody else puts this property under contract? What are they going to do?
That's for rain and water mitigation system.
Or what's the first thing they're going to do?
That's good.
Test again. You already have a test, you can skip that spot, right? So if you just provided the test to them, and they know how high the uranium is, maybe they'll decide not to do another test. Maybe you won't be renegotiating it at inspections because you can say, you already have that information when you wrote the offer. Here they're saying, I didn't know the uranium was off the chart. Now I want $10,000 system. This water needed a $10,000 system. Had the estimate and the test. How do you think she did disclosing it? Not great. Not a service to her sellers, in my opinion there. But did she break the law? She do anything there the real estate commission wouldn't like?
Not giving the results.
Not giving the results when she had them, very good. Okay, now let's look at the septic. Private septic tank, 1,000-gallon concrete. Is every system a concrete tank? No, in fact, the new systems are using plastic. So you want to make sure that you get that right. Just don't say, okay, here it is. What else? Now, what else is wrong with this disclosure here? If you can't see, please move up front.
They left blank spaces.
Left a lot of blank spaces. Let me tell you what happened. This was the way that's how it was written when I had the property under contract. So I went out and had a septic inspection done. That septic inspection was just put in like a year ago. The HHE 200 is at the town. What's it say? Date of installation, nothing. Date last pumped, nothing. Brand new system, never been pumped. What do you put? What do you put in date last pumped?
New system hasn't been pumped.
New system hasn't been pumped or none. Okay? Now, here's something to remember. When somebody does a replacement septic system, what's the one thing you gotta watch that sometimes will catch you? Do they always replace the whole system?
No.
What is it that oftentimes doesn't get replaced? Leach field usually is the one that gets replaced. What's the one that doesn't usually get replaced?
Actual tank.
The actual tank. They might put a new baffle in, they might put a new cover on. But the tank, if it's good, doesn't need to be replaced. It's the system, the leach field, that oftentimes wears out. So if you're looking at an HHE 200, everyone know what that is?
Yeah.
The HHE 200 is the document that the soils engineer did to design the septic system. It's taken into the town. The inspector looks at it and approves it for a permit, and he signs it as a permit. Now, there's another place on that document that is signed if it's installed and inspected. There are properties you will find, especially around the lake, where maybe somebody's building a new home, and the inspector says, you gotta put a new septic system, you gotta design a new septic system. You don't have to replace the old one, but you have to have a new design in order to get a building permit. So you open up the file and you see a brand new HHE 200, right there. No signatures on it, just a new HHE 200. Doesn't mean it's in the ground, guys. Has to have a signature that it was a permit issued, and then a signature from the code officer that says he inspected it when it was installed. If you don't have that signature, and it happens out there where the code officer never did the final inspection, or he just forgot to sign, then that opens up more questions. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, did you place this system in the ground 4 years ago? Oh, no, we just had to have that design done. Or, well, we were thinking about expanding our bedrooms and we had the design done, then we decided not to. Find out, is it in the ground? They go, oh yeah, it's in the ground. Then it's to the code office. Mr. Code, you didn't sign this as being in the ground and inspected. Do you know it's in the ground? Would you sign it now? If he says no, then you just document it. Went to the town. System, seller says system's in the ground. Sometimes I'll even put there, HHE 200 not signed by code officer. Because I don't want him to come back on me and say, you should have known that that system wasn't in the ground. But yeah, I told you I had the design. Seller said they put it in. I told you it wasn't signed. It's your job to figure the rest out, Mr. Buyer Agent. Buyer agents, you're kind of getting all the things that you have to look at because you're held just as accountable, if not more, for these items when it's your buyer. Leach field, look at this, date of leach field installation, nothing. Installed by, nothing. Date of last servicing of leach field, nothing. Is that the same as pumping? Is pumping a septic tank the same as servicing a leach field? What's the difference?
Well, they actually do more holes and stuff in that.
Yeah.
Check, filled up and on.
And it might be, the most common things is roots got into the system and they went in and did some servicing and got rid of the roots. Or somebody drove over the chambers and one was crushed and they had to replace it. Pumping the tank is not servicing the leach field. So remember that there's a difference there. Does this seller have records of the septic system, how many bedrooms it was designed for? This is a no. The answer here was yes, we had the design, brand new system. Who is being given a disservice when you don't do this properly? The sellers, they got a brand new septic system. Wouldn't that be nice to know? Recent inspection in September and June 2016 was satisfactory. What might you also put to that? Report attached?
Yeah.
They had the report. I gave it to them. It was a great system. Sellers should be bragging about that. That's a big deal. Questions on that so far? Second, is system in a shoreline zone? What if you're not sure?
It's on the HA, isn't it on the HA?
Should be on the HH. You can check with the code. You can check yes and say believe so. Err on the side of caution. Okay, let's look at this. Heating system. We're missing what? Age of system. We're missing name of company that services it. And they had a service call, so they obviously know. If they don't remember who serviced it, what do you put? Unknown. Pertinent information, little use. Maybe I might be a little more specific if I really want to put that in there. You also might put, when we tested that system, it tested high for carbon monoxide. It immediately went off the chart. But the fact of the matter was the system hadn't been run for years. So rather than little use, it might have been nice to say system has not been run for years. Because then the inspector, instead of saying, oh, the inspector says this furnace is gone. I can't even keep it running because it just went off the chart with carbon monoxide the minute I turned it on. Well, when I brought the furnace guy out, he said, of course it did. It hadn't been run for years. That's expected. So little more information makes it better. Another buyer might have said, oh, furnace is gone, we're walking, and not had an inspector come in. A furnace inspector. Because building inspectors know enough just to get you in trouble, right? Is there an oil supply line? Is it buried? Is it sleeved? Stuff you need to look when you list that property. And if you go in, you see a system, it's in, there's an underground fuel line, it's not sleeved. You know, prevention is worth a pound of cure. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that's going to be flagged. Why don't you go ahead and have the system serviced and cleaned and have the inspector change that over so it becomes a non-issue so we don't have to deal with it. Or at least let them know they expect. Because what an easier conversation to have when you've got a request from inspections to say, remember we talked about that this was probably going to be flagged? It is, so yeah, we got to do that. That's way easier than to have them say, why didn't you tell me?
In the past, this is a question I always had in that part. It's like, how do you tell if it's sleeved or not?
You can see it right on it.
Have is it like a different color or the
Yeah, you can see it right on it. It is very, yeah, it's got something, you know, you've got the copper usually tube and then there's a sleeve around it. Really easy to see. Yeah. And then she puts, owner is not here in the winter, so there's been little use. Chimney been inspected? No, blah, 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 blah. Then we get out underground storage tanks. If the answer is no, you don't need to go any further other than comments none. Asbestos. Now this particular house was the oldest house in Raymond. Okay, they believe it's the oldest house in Raymond. What do you think about that asbestos answering? I would have put unknown. Because chances are, who knows what's under that siding? Who knows what's the third floor down underneath the first two layers of floor that are there? Who knows what's under the roof shingles? I would have put unknown unless my son was absolutely positive that it was a no. And I don't know, maybe he was. But better to put unknown than put no and then find out there was, because you know what's going to happen. 5 years from now, seller rips up the floor, finds asbestos flooring. Okay? How does asbestos flooring have to be removed? Professionally by an abatement company. Dollar signs? Who do you think he's going to come back after? You, because the seller's long gone. But he's coming back after you because Keller Williams Realty must have deep pockets. So we'll go to them and get them. Your device is not fully protected. Okay, let's see. Okay, now we're on radon. Has it been tested? No. All else is fine there, other than nothing. Everything should be fine. Radon water. Yes. June 8th, 2016, that was mine, right? I had that tested by, right on the report that I gave him. Okay. Results. High. Really? It wasn't that high. Put it in there. I wasn't going to mitigate it. It wasn't that high. Put it on. What's the level that's recommended by the EPA? in water? 10,000. Yeah, 10,000. If you're a buyer agent and you get one in at 7,500, what are you saying to your buyer when your buyer says, geez, this is way over, we need to have this fixed? What's the conversation that you have? Direct them to somebody that knows about radon and say, yeah, by the way, it was the level, the recommended level was just 4,000 a few years ago. So give somebody a call. You know what? I can't tell you how many times I'll get a radon test in, an air rating. Level's 4, right? It'll come in at 5.6 and they gotta have it mitigated. EPA recommends a retest of that. You know, plug these guys to somebody that knows, or give them the information. Not every. The end result is to sell the house, is it not? So educate them properly so that they can make a good decision on whether they want to proceed. Not scare the crap out of them. Right now, we're looking at like 15% fallout on contracts. And a lot of it is because brokers are so busy, they're not taking the time to properly do disclosures, to properly educate the buyers, to properly educate the sellers. This is a big deal. Radon water. Owner doesn't have a copy of recent tests. And really, they could find me and ask for it if they truly didn't get it, right? Let's see, lead paint. Is there now or has there ever been lead paint hazard on the property? And the answer is no and unknown but possible due to age. Okay. Are you aware of any cracking, peeling, or flaking paint? No. That's not true. Woodwork and doors have been replaced. That might be true, but there's still peeling paint.
And what was there before? It looks like she whited it out.
Hell if I know.
She meant to go in and add to that no and unknown because you can't click both of them in the when you're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. She has a handwriting.
Yeah. Okay. So, any encroachments, rights of way? Yes. Leach field easement in place over neighbor's land per seller. That's fine. Is there a tax exemption? No. Is this house currently covered by flood insurance policy? No. And guys, please don't make the mistake of not doing these disclosures with your seller. Do them with your seller. Leased equipment? No. What is the most common leased equipment that's out there? Propane tank. And why do our sellers not think of that when we ask them if there's any leased equipment?
It's the least cost of the tank is built into the fuel.
They don't even know they're leasing it. So you got to say, do you own that propane tank or does the company still own it? Oh, we own it. It's been here since it was bought. It was here when we bought it. When we bought the house, it was here. You know, let's call the company and check because I'm pretty sure it says Dead River on it. And I think they own it, right?
Are there any other time when they do own the propane tank?
Yeah, they can purchase them. And sometimes they do, especially if it's an underground tank. They purchase it. I will tell you that as an owner, a property that I purchased for a flip, I purchased the property, propane tank was there when I purchased it. I did have it filled as the owner, and it was there when I sold it. When they went back to fill it or pick it up 6 months, a year later, it was gone. And they sent me a bill. So make sure when your sellers, you're telling them, okay, Dead River owns that propane tank. You need to call them and tell them that you're selling the house, that the new owner has purchased the propane from you, and they need to make arrangements to contact their owner about their tanks.
So Dead River contacted you?
It was actually, it wasn't Dead River. It was Fieldings sent me a bill. And I did not pay it. I said, no, sold the property, long gone. You need to deal with that. I'm not paying for your tank.
Another one I've run into recently is with old Unitil gas hot water heaters. Those are also subject to lease, but
Lease.
now Unitil no longer leases hot water heaters. So here's an old system. Now it comes time that it fails, inevitably on the coldest
Yeah.
night of the year. Now they're going, well,
Well,
can I get a new one? No, you need a brand new gas hot water heater.
So the whole deal is disclosure and ask questions. This is not, excuse me, this is not part of your job that you're thinking about time management in. You take the time for this one, because this will bite you in the butt. You've got to have these disclosures right. Okay, so the other thing that can be leased often is a water treatment system. So if it had a water treatment system, make sure you ask that question. Do you own that? Oh, no, we just pay the bill every month and it pays for the system. That's a lease. Let's see, year built, 1790. Amazing that I had no lead-based paint. Water, moisture, leakage, no. There was mold upstairs under the eaves that the human eye could easily see. Okay? When we did the inspection, it was noted. And it was noted in my request for an investigation contingency addendum that the mold was dealt with. Really. Let's see. Has all or a portion of the property been surveyed? This was yes, the survey was available, but the survey was for the property next door, so it only had 2 or 3 pins on this one. Has the property been surveyed? No. You might put, has the property been surveyed? Has all or portion? Yes. Is it available? Yes. And then maybe in the comments, say, full property has not been surveyed, neighbors surveyed, which caused part of this to be surveyed. See attached. Because if you put that, they're going to say, you told me it was surveyed and it was available. I want the whole thing, Mr. Seller, go do it. Let's see. Manufactured housing. You know what? Modulars are really tough to distinguish. So you need to ask. And you need to check that file at the town office. Because that's really tough. I wish they'd just get rid of that, quite frankly. Because you can't even tell anymore. And when people say, are modular homes great? I say to them, I would challenge you to take a house that was built on site, put it on a trailer, and drive it down the turnpike at 55 miles an hour. That's what happens with a modular. They're built in a controlled indoor setting and then shipped on place. I would challenge they're probably better built instead of built on site. Known material defect, a little leak around skylights. Now, didn't it say previously in the disclosure no leaks on the roof? Okay. Stone chimney leads to the rear. The structural engineer said the stone chimney was falling in and going to take here's a stone chimney, here's the foundation. Stone chimney pulls out, foundation goes in. One cement block wall in garage under L bulge and there are cracks. Repairs and new support may be needed. Sound okay? What about if you had a structural engineer's report that said both walls are failed and the house should not be occupied until it is repaired? Where do you think your liability is here? The house is falling in. I gave them estimates for $40,000 to fix it. And this is the comment? Now, let me tell you the really scary part. This property is under contract and the next buyer did no inspection.
What? Yikes.
It is pending and the buyer did no inspections.
Who's there? Just
Antique home has had much updating over the years, but inspections are recommended. Is that a catch-all that will take care of all those flaws? Absolutely not. And this agent has more time in business than me. This buyer agents is what you are dealing with out there. And you better have your act together, because you're gonna be held responsible for it. Did I scare you just a little?
Yeah. Okay. Knowing that you know.
Yeah.
Being in your contract, do you do anything with that information? And you
You know, I struggled with it, and I still struggle today with it. And I'll tell you what I struggle with, and maybe you can help me unstruggle. I could send it to the real estate commission, but I'm a commissioner. And I was the buyer. That feels kind of shitty to me. You know? Feels like a tattletale. We're all taught not to be tattletales. I feel incredibly bad for the next buyer on this property. Who paid cash, so there's not gonna be any inspections by an appraiser either.
Your responsibility is on that.
Yeah, my responsibility was me as my buyer, and that was it. I called the agent who I am friends with and said, yeah, you know, if I were you, I would really be concerned about liability, and I would really make sure that the next buyer has the inspection report and especially that engineer's report. Because you're hanging out. I called her repeatedly for 2 weeks to have her update the disclosures in the MLS. Now that was a personal motivator, because I knew if she updated the disclosure, it would scare other buyers, and I still probably would have bought the property if they got realistically well priced. So I was personally looking out for my own good when I repeatedly got after her to update the disclosures. If this was a Keller Williams agent, we would be sitting in the office with Leanne Barstow talking about where they might want to hang their license, because it wouldn't be here with this kind of work.
You mentioned about the serious structural issues and so forth. Now it's transcending just money and convenience, potential loss of life, something like that.
Yeah.
So to answer the question of how I might address it, I always like to take care of stuff locally. Always give somebody the benefit of the doubt. But then if that doesn't work, I think the next step might be, this is what God made DBs. They talk about these things because they're going to hold each other to a higher standard and work through it. It's part of being a designated broker.
Yeah,
But
the
even,
DB on here is the Pillow Talk husband.
but even if that doesn't work to cover myself in this case, I would go ahead and I would send a registered letter with receipt. It's the last resort, just to be able to come back and say, this is what.
I thought about giving it to the town code officer too, but that felt, had it been another buyer that I represented, there, I would have no issue. Because it was me, I have an issue. Because it just feels like I'm being a pissed off buyer that didn't get the property, which is not the case. I wasn't taking the property unless they adjusted financially for the cost of these things going into it.
Can you slip the file into
Some good thoughts, you know, some good thoughts. So, yeah. So, you know, the point is, and this was the best example that I could bring you of disclosures today, because it's one of the worst that I've seen in years. And I wanted you to see, as buyer agents, what's out there that you have to uncover. And I wanted you to see, as seller agents, how we can get lazy and screw up. And you don't want to do that. This is really important stuff. I imagine, you know, unless these new buyers bought it for a tear down, which is possible. You know, there's some issues there that really got to be addressed. And even if they did bought it for a tear down and it had asbestos or lead-based paint, when you tear a place down with lead-based paint, that's way different than tearing a place down that doesn't have it. You can't even scrape and paint a property unless you have a license to deal with lead-based paint as a painter when it was this old. You know, just stuff you got to deal with. Okay, now let's scare you a little more, because that's my job today. All right. This is a recent decision at the Real Estate Commission. Names are public, but just to be a nice guy, I'm not going to. This one was a complaint from a buyer that the agents did not disclose high arsenic levels in the water supply of a property they listed for sale. So-and-so is a broker with so-and-so. On May 22nd, 2015, the sellers of a property listed at Keene Drive in Gorham entered into an exclusive right to sell with so-and-so broker, and they were named as appointed agents. When listing the property for sale, the agents met with the seller and prepared the property disclosure information based on the information they provided. The sellers told them that when they purchased the property in 2001, their inspections had indicated the presence of an elevated level of arsenic in the well water. As a result of those tests, the sellers installed 2 point-of-use filter systems in the home, one in the kitchen and the other connected to the bathroom faucet in order to mitigate the arsenic. Very common, right? 2 arsenic remedies, one's a whole house system, one's a point-of-use system. The sellers were unable to locate those original water tests and did not recall the level of arsenic found at the time. More recent tests were available on water samples that had been filtered by the point-of-use system, which indicated the filtered water to be satisfactory for drinking. So now here's a thought. If your seller decides they're going to take a water test and there's any kind of a water treatment system involved, the question that you as brokers need to ask is, did you take this before the system was put in or after? And did you take it at a location before the water was filtered or after? Because that's really important stuff. The property disclosure information prepared by the agent noted that the water was tested in January 2014 and the water tests were available. According to the agent, this was a test of filtered water to show that the mitigation system was working and satisfactory for drinking. Really important to note that. In fact, I would take the results and write on the results. Sample taken from filtered water. A no answer was marked in response to the question of, to your knowledge, have there ever been test results reported as unsatisfactory or satisfactory with notation? But in the answer to what steps have been taken to remedy, it says mitigation system installed. So it's kind of like, no, there's asbestos, yes, there is, or unknown. So they did, brokers in a hurry. Another lab analysis report dated 2015 was specifically tested for arsenic on a filtered water sample, reported that the water was satisfactory for drinking. Buyers represented by a licensee at another agency submitted an offer to purchase the property. Offer was accepted. Buyers elected to terminate the purchase and sale because they did not want to purchase property with private well and septic. Buyers did not conduct any inspections before they decided to terminate the purchase agreement. A month later, licensee at another agent submitted an offer from the Hamiltons to purchase the property. The offer provided that the sellers agree to install a whole house arsenic mitigation system for the water supply. So buyers asked for that right up front. The offer was not accepted by the sellers. According to the agent, the sellers and the buyers and their agent were told from the beginning that the disclosed mitigation system was a 2 point-of-use system for arsenic, and that's why their initial offer included the provision for a whole house water system. So what the agent's saying is, hey, these buyers came along, they asked for a whole house water system because we told them point up that this was a point-of-use system. So we disclosed. Now, you notice now the Real Estate Commission has uncovered that there were 2 buyers so far. What does that tell you about the Real Estate Commission investigations?
They go back and check it.
They check every single document in your file. Every note in your file, every email, every text, everything from soup to nuts. If the complaint is about this issue over here, they still check the entire file and can fine you for that issue over there. Okay? A month later, the buyers came back and submitted a new offer to purchase the property. The offer provided for $1,000 earnest money to be held in the trust account of the listing agent, and subject to a general building inspection and water test to be performed within 10 days and deemed satisfactory to the buyers. The offer was accepted by the seller and included an addendum which provided that the sellers would pay $3,500 for a whole house treatment system at closing. The addendum was signed by the buyers and after the agent provided the buyer's agent with an updated property disclosure information form, which reported a 2001 water test with unsatisfactory results and added that to remedy the problem, a mitigation system was installed for arsenic. Couple weeks later, the buyers had a water quality test performed on an unfiltered water sample from the property. The result was, as the result of a high radon air test, the sellers agreed to install the radon air mitigation system prior to closing. A few days later, when visiting the property with a water treatment company representative who was providing a quote for a full house water treatment system to treat arsenic, the buyers learned that the water test in July showed extremely high elevated arsenic levels. So the water treatment guy had that information and said this place was off the chart high. The buyers were advised by the water company representative that such high levels of arsenic would require a far more expensive treatment system than had originally been suggested. So remember, these buyers negotiated $3,500 for a whole house system. Then they brought in the company and found out, whoa, that's not going to cover it. Couple lessons there for buyer agents. Lesson that don't agree to a price for something and let your buyers believe it's going to cover the whole thing until you got to mess with it. Then, of course, no surprise, 2 days later, the buyers agreed in writing to terminate the purchase and sale agreement, and the sellers agreed to release earnest money to the buyers. The broker updated the property disclosure with the results of the July 2015 water test as well as the results of the radon test. Those test results were available to potential buyers following the decision not to purchase the property. What do you think the conclusion of the Real Estate Commission might have been? Give an idea. What do you think they did? Maybe fined for not disclosing. Definitely made some mistakes, the seller, right? But they also made, they said like different answers. It's obvious they weren't trying to hide anything, but they did a really sloppy job, right? Okay. The agents were cautioned to exercise greater care when preparing a property disclosure form. The property disclosure information provided to the buyers in June of 2015 noted results of a water test taken in January 2014, when results of a more recent test were available. The property disclosure information noted that no prior water test had been reported as unsatisfactory, yet also noted there was a mitigation system that had been installed. While no evidence was found that the brokers were aware of the magnitude of the arsenic level present in the well water when they listed it for sale, they failed to explain in the disclosure information that the water filters were installed in the property were specifically intended to address arsenic, or that the available satisfactory water tests were from water samples that had been filtered by the mitigation system. However, ample evidence was found that the buyers were made aware of the arsenic issue before they made their initial offer. That offer included a provision that the seller would install a whole house arsenic mitigation system for the water supply. For that reason only, the issue is not being pursued, dismissed. Okay? Now, what do you think if that agent comes back before the commission with a similar issue? He's done. He'll get dinged badly, right? Okay. All right, want to hear another one? This is a scary one. This could be any one of us. This is a consent agreement. Now, when you have a complaint at the Real Estate Commission, 3 things can happen. It can be dismissed, like this first one was. It can have a consent agreement like this one was, where you sit down with the Real Estate Commission and you say, yeah, I screwed up. And they say, okay, we're going to fine you $1,000, and you go, okay, I'll sign it. Now, the thing to remember with that is that every piece of paper that the real estate commission got goes directly to the complaint. And now you're saying, yes, I screwed up. So what do you think follows quickly on the heels of that lawsuit? Absolutely right. So if you have a complaint before the real estate commission and you decide that you're going to do a consent agreement, who might you want to talk to first? Your attorney and your DBB. To see, am I placing myself in a place where I could be sued? And some agents, quite frankly, I mean, sometimes it's 2 to 3 years from the point of the complaint before it gets resolved. And that's stressful, and it takes you away from doing what you're supposed to be doing. I had one of my buyer agents who had a complaint because they said she went illegally to the town and reported a septic issue. And as it was found out in the complaint, she got the report that the septic was failed. The inspector called her and said, hey, Tom at the town office wants a copy of that inspection that I did for you on that septic. Can you send it over? What did she do? She called her buyer, thank God, and said, can I have your permission to share this inspection report with the town because the inspector has asked me to send it to them, and documented that fact. Thank God she has a lot of seat. She did, and that saved her. That complaint was dismissed, but it took 3 years, and her stress level was up here for 3 years, thinking that, did I do something wrong? Is there something else in the file they're gonna find? Right? So, yeah. So just don't go into a consent agreement because it's going to come back at you. All right. On April 2015, a buyer filed a complaint with the Maine Real Estate Commission against an agent who was a designated broker in the agent. The issues of the complaint were investigated, and the following conduct was found to constitute a violation. On June 2nd, 2012, this just came down the road. When did it happen? How many years ago? Yeah. Okay, 2012, the sellers entered into an exclusive right to sell their property with this agent, located on a 3-acre lot on Thompson Lake. The agent was named as an appointed agent. The sellers provided the agent with a drawing which depicted the subdivision layout. According to the drawing, a house lot included 175 feet of waterfront along a shallow cove where the sellers maintained a dock. The sellers told the agent that they also maintained a second dock at a right-of-way on the lake where the water was deep and had deep access, showing the drawing as a 50-foot right-of-way between 2 other house lots approximately 500 feet further down the road. The broker reviewed the deed and stated, after seeing the right-of-way written on the deed, because the deed referenced the right-of-way, she had no reason to doubt that that right-of-way was for the dock in the deep water, which the sellers drew a picture of and said, here's our dock that we have a right-of-way to. The sellers also told the broker that both docks were to be left in place and included with the sale. So the broker, who's been in the industry 25 years or so, took their word, maybe didn't look too closely at the verbiage on the deed to see where that right-of-way, certainly didn't send it to the title company to say, can you tell me where this right-of-way is? And just said, okay, and listed the property. Could have been any one of us, me included. Seller's deed for the property made reference only to the right-of-way from the property over the road for travel or foot with vehicles in common with owners of other lots bordering the same to and from said Route 141. So the right-of-way she saw in the deed was not for a dock, it was for the road. Very common with lakefront, right? Gotta have a right-of-way to get to the property. If it's a private road and it doesn't say it has a right-of-way, that's another issue. Seller, the deed also referenced to conveyance of another parcel of land used for the subsurface septic disposal. There was no reference in the deed to a separate right-of-way which provided access to Thompson Lake. Property disclosure information form prepared by the agent included a yes answer mark to the response to the question, is property subject to or have benefits from encroachments, easements, rights of way, blah, blah, blah. The information also provided on the next line of the form, CD, right-of-way for leach field, road association, and right-of-way to Thompson Lake with private dock. Seller is noted as the source of this information. So she didn't put, it was her. So seller told me this, here it is. In the additional information section, it was noted that seller is only using one right-of-way at this time. Technically, there could be more. There could be at the most 4 households using the right-of-way. And I'll tell you, just on a side note, I would never say that because that is way too much. You can't even go research. How do you know that somebody else doesn't have a right-of-way to it? You're not going to inspect every single deed in that town. That is way beyond our expertise. But anyway, so the property was listed again for sale with the same agent. And again, a year later, the same agent, named as appointed agent. The property disclosure information prepared in 2012 was not updated when the property was relisted for sale either in 2013 or 2014. So what's that? When are you supposed to update disclosures? When do you update disclosure? When you relist the property and when else? When you have more information about the property, right? It's a living document. It does not just sit there and end. You have to constantly update this. When I sit with sellers and I go over the exclusive right to sell, I say, and here's the most important thing in this document. If anything changes with the house, you have the oil, oil furnace serviced, you pump the septic, you get a leak, the plumbing leaks, call me because we have to update this disclosure. And I tell them if there's one thing that you might be sued for after the fact, it's because this disclosure is not accurate. We need to keep this updated. Let's see. On July 25, 2014, licensee from another agent who represented the buyer as her appointed agent submitted the offer on a pre-printed purchase and sale agreement for the property. Offer was accepted, transaction closed. Following the closing, the buyer discovered that her deed did not include a right-of-way to the lake, and she had no right to maintain a dock at the right-of-way area, which was deeded only to owners whose property did not have water frontage. Now remember, she had water frontage on the cove that you really couldn't keep a boat in. And the owners said, sellers said, you got this right away where you can keep your boat. So she buys the property and then finds out, no, she can't keep her boat there. How upset do you think she might be?
Very.
Agreement, where the parties wish to conclude this matter without a hearing before the commission and hereby agree to the following terms. Subject to the approval of the commission and the Department of the Attorney General. The broker acknowledged that all facts set forth is true to the best of her knowledge and belief. The broker acknowledged that she failed to act in a reasonably prudent manner in order to avoid error on or about June 2nd, 2012, when she did not sufficiently determine the specifics of the right-of-way for the property which was contained in the seller deeds, which constitutes a violation of subsection of MRSA 10, blah, 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 blah. The broker acknowledges that she failed to act in a reasonably prudent manner in order to avoid error on about June 2nd, 2012, when she provided incorrect information regarding the evidence of a water right-of-way for the property, which constitutes a violation. The broker agreed to pay a fine in the amount of $750. The fine shall be submitted to the commission by June 30th, 2016, and shall be made payable to the Treasurer of State of Maine. The director and the commission agree that no further agency or legal action will be taken against the broker by the commission based on the facts described, except if the broker does not fully comply with the terms of this agreement. The commission shall initiate whatever action is deemed necessary. The director of the commission may consider the misconduct described above as evidence of a pattern of contact in the event that similar misconduct allegations are brought against the broker in the future. Additionally, the director may consider the fact that discipline was imposed by this agreement as a factor in determining appropriate discipline should any further misconduct allegations be proven against the broker in the future. So I am sure that when they did this consent agreement, because we as the commission don't see it until we approve the consent agreement, so we don't get to know all the ins and outs before, I am sure that they took into consideration that this broker had an exemplary record for like 25 years. And that this was an error, and they only fined her $750. But what do you think is probably going to happen if it happened already? Buyer's gonna sue. That is way more than a $750 item. How much sleep do you think that broker lost? How bad do you think she feels? Because she is a great agent. And what happened to her reputation? And now she's put on notice, another one comes across our desk, young lady, we're not gonna use a light on you.
Mm-hmm.
The commission can pull your license. We just did that last month. We terminated their license period, amen, never to be licensed in the state of Maine. That's only the first penalty. The second is that you're going to be sued. So you could lose your license and your livelihood and be sued if you don't pay attention to these disclosures. So just know that and take care of that and watch for yourself and make sure. Buyer agents, you are not off the hook. I don't know if that buyer agent in this case was tagged, but she damn well should have been, or he. Because it was just as much her job to make sure that there was a right of way that was the seller's agent.
The seller don't have any recourse.
Absolutely could be sued. No question about it, could be sued. And if they found, where it really comes down to the bad part for a seller, was if they found that they knew and didn't disclose, that's even worse. Good. You're welcome. So like it's and when it happens, and you can't imagine how many times it happens, you know, they report something, no big deal, and then so there's rot, all right? Rot on this wall. The seller hires a contractor to come in and they fix that rot. The contractor says, you know, you've got rot over here too. They go, well, that's not bad enough yet, I'm just gonna fix this. House sells, they didn't disclose any other rot. The contractor comes in, same contractor, which happens more often than you know, and says, oh yeah, I told them this wall was rotted. Okay, can you put that in writing for me? Or the where I've really seen it too was wells. Oh yeah, this well's gone dry 4 times before in the past. You know, so, and those things that the seller lies to you and there's no way you would have known or could have known, you're okay. But if you should have known and didn't, or could have known and didn't, that's a big deal.
The dock thing is interesting to me because there's a lot of associations and it's hard, it's not always in the deed. And the seller will say, yes, you can see everybody has a dock, and how do we find that out? Or we just have to disclose that the seller.
How would you find that
out?
out? You'd go to the town, where else could you go? The association.
Sometimes the associations are not even
Yeah,
associations.
And so all it is disclosure.
Yeah.
Seller says they have a right of way to this dock, could not be confirmed. And sometimes it just isn't. Nobody wrote it down. Or they said a seller has that they have a right of way to turn left at the oak tree and 10 feet of frontage, you know? You know. Yeah. The other big thing is too, where is the right of way? Is that the right of way that was described, or is it this one over here? This one has a sandy beach, that one has snakes. Do you know? And as long as you disclose that you can't determine, that's okay. Sometimes you can, but you've got to let that buyer know everything they do. That is disclosable. Questions?
I think the most important, especially in this market, is going to be next to it.
You know,
Can't
that's
practice
right.
medicine without a license, and you can't do plumbing without a license.
Exactly, and you
Yes,
can't
we've heard
do
that.
legal work if you're not an attorney.
Right.
know your limitations. And if you have questions, call your mentor, call your DB, call any of us and say, what do I do about this? And document, document, document. If you are not documenting, if you don't have a system to take notes through your entire transaction, you are going to be screwed. You've got to be able to do that. And as tough as it is, when you're so busy and you're doing things on the fly in the car, you've got to make sure you document them.
Do you do a hard copy? Sorry. Do you do a hard copy, or do you just rely on your electronic? Or
I rely on my electronics.
Yeah.
Which is out in an iCloud someplace.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what my question was, how do you document?
Yeah, I do it. I use Easy Coordinator. And we document everything. Because on my team, we have multiple people putting in notes. I might handle something today, Cody might handle it tomorrow, Chris might handle it the day after. And we want to make sure they're all in the same place.
Just one other thing about the consent agreements is the fact that that becomes public domain information. And anyone can go out to the real estate commission and they can see what you've got out there. So you've got the time, the aggravation, potentially the money. But
And then the embarrassment.
at the end of the day, it's really all we have.
It's all we have.
And
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I can't even count the many times I could have been before the commission. And probably will be in the future. You know, it's a roulette. But the best that we can do is the best we can do. We can be very cautious and very conscientious. And we can still screw up, and if we do, it is what it is. But try to do everything you can not to screw up so that you're not in this position.
Questions. Lots of times I see they do the consent agreement because somebody hasn't done the credit hours that they have to do. If they sign that, are they leaving themselves vulnerable for practicing during a time that they didn't have the credit they were supposed to have?
I think that would be a stretch. I think that would be a stretch, but I will tell you.
Don't get their credit.
Yeah, I will tell you that I as a commissioner, got on a soapbox a couple of months ago where we had an agent who clearly knew that he didn't have the credit hours when he sent the form. And I stood up and said, no, you know, and I said, if somebody, you know, took the wrong court class, or clearly didn't realize, I mean, if you clearly just made an error, that's okay. But if you lie, and here's my point, if they're lying to the real estate commission about whether or not they had credit hours, and you're letting them perform, what are they lying to their buyers and sellers about? If they're lying to the commission, I said, no, that's not a $500 fine. I said, take their license for a time. You know? And then the next month when one came before us, it had a much greater fine than a $500 fine for lying to the commission. Because really, if I can't trust somebody to tell the commission about their credit hours, I don't trust them to work with a buyer or seller. Anything else? I've kept you over. I'm very sorry, but I'm passionate about this. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I gotta get it.
Huh?
I gotta get it back to Tennessee. So I'm holding it there, it's still active.